I'm Stephen Childs of virtualvoicelessons.net, and I would like to welcome you to this week's lesson in our pitch matching series entitled, Am I Tone Deaf? Many of us, at some point or another, have been unhappy with our seeming inability to sing the right notes when performing a song. It may be as simple as not being able to stay accurately in key with complex melodies, or staying on our melody when singing along with a harmony. But there are some of us who either have noticed ourselves or, more than likely, have been told by others that we cannot stay in key at all and may be tone deaf. This is another one of those terms that I've heard many, many times throughout the years, and I can say, quite frankly, is as wrong as you can get. And no matter if we experience just brief moments of singing wrong notes, or if it is a huge, ongoing problem for us as singers, the answers are the same. There is no such thing as tone deafness, only tone unawareness. Again, there's absolutely no such thing as tone deafness, where there is a physical inability that plagues certain people who can hear sounds fine, but have a deformity that prevents them from hearing the pitch of that sound and therefore cannot imitate it. Now, the problem of pitch matching stems from this one simple fact. Great or small, the inability to match pitches is caused from guessing the note rather than listening. The mind has an incredible ability to remember sound. Most of us can remember the sound of certain people's voices in our heads, even if we haven't heard those voices for several years. And this is not only their vocal tone, but the actual note choices of their voice as well. But even more amazing, the mind can also hear sound before it ever enters into the ears. This is known as the mind's ear. And when we don't hear the sound that we're trying to imitate in our minds first, we then are left with the only other option, which is to guess at it. So let me now give you a quick demonstration of the mind's incredible ability to not only remember the sound, but more importantly, generate that sound in the mind without it being heard first.
Now, to demonstrate the mind's ear, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a series of notes on the piano keyboard, and I want you to just bear with me for a minute so I can show you the point being made. Take a listen. You see, my mind could hear that sound before I played it. It remembered what was coming up. That's what I mean by the mind's ear. This is what we need to do every time we go to sing. We need to hear it first. Now I'm going to give you another example. I'm going to go up a major scale. There again, my mind could hear that note before I finally played it. Let me do it again. And there it was, the mind's ear.
As you know, there are many reasons why all students of voice are trained using major and minor scales. One reason, of course, is that it provides us with a medium to practice how much pressure we need to exert as notes ascend or descend, or how much we need to open the throat, and so on. But one of the most important reasons to work in these diatonic scales is that it improves our mind's ear. In other words, it is important to have these scales burnt into our minds, because when we are singing songs, we are in fact singing scales. And the distance between the notes within the scales, which are known as intervals, is something that needs to start sticking in our thinking. You see, just practicing scales alone helps refine our skills at staying in key, and is a main reason you need to start listening to yourself as you sing them. But what does this term singing in key actually mean? Well, let me explain it this way. One of the very first things that we were taught as children is our alphabet. In the case of the English alphabet, we have a string of 26 letters that we often learn from beginning to end. The individual letters usually don't mean too much. It is not until we take a few of these letters from that alphabet and put them together to form words. Then we take word after word to form sentences, and then sentence after sentence until finally we have some kind of story. And this is exactly how music functions as well. Except in music, we don't just have one alphabet, we basically have 12 alphabets, which we call keys. We have the musical alphabet or key called the key of C major. Then we have the musical alphabet or key called the key of D flat major. Next is the key of D major, E flat major, and so on, all the way up till we reach the 12th musical alphabet, in this case, the key of B major. Now, as you may have noticed, the different keys and notes within the keys also have letter names, just like our alphabet. And just like our alphabet, when we take the individual letters, or notes, as it's called in music, we start putting them together and we wind up with not words, but chords. Chords in music are equivalent to words found in language. In music, a chord is 3 or more different notes played together. And just to mention, when these same notes are played one note at a time, instead of together, they are no longer considered chords, but broken chords, or more specifically, arpeggios. Now again, in language, when we piece together words, we eventually form sentences. But in music, it's not called sentences, they're called chord progressions. Lastly, when we string sentences with sentences in language, we wind up with paragraphs and then ultimately a story of some kind. In music, it's the same idea. Instead of paragraphs, we get the parts to a song, namely the verse, the chorus, and so on, and then finally a song as a whole. But when we break it all down, where did these parts of a song come from? They came from the musical alphabet, which again we refer to as a key. Now, when we hear the word key and when we hear the word scale, they are in fact the same thing. For instance, if I'm singing a song in the key of C major, all the chords and melodies come from the C major scale. The starting chord may be the first, third, and fifth note from that scale. The next chord may be the third, fifth, and seventh note from that scale. And the next chord may be the fifth, seventh, and ninth note of the scale. And then over top of it, I would hopefully be singing a string of notes that are also from that scale, which we call a melody. I would then be singing in the key or scale of C major. Let me demonstrate this for you.
Okay, now here is the C major scale. And just to let you know, a lot of instructors of music use C major because it's all the white keys on the piano. Every other scale, besides its relative minor, have some black keys. It's a little bit harder to see. But C major is all these white keys. Okay? So what I'm going to do is play you the C major scale. This is 1 octave. And I'm going to now pull chords from this scale. I'm going to take the first note, the third note, and the fifth note and play them together. And that's our first chord, the C major chord. Now what I'll do is I'll go to the fifth note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll play the fifth, seventh, and ninth. Okay, this happens to be a G major chord. Fifth, seventh, and ninth. And then I'll go back and play the C major. Now over top of this, I'm still going to play C major, but I'm going to play a melody. I'm just going to pluck out some different notes from the scale, and I'll do that for you right now. That's what it means to play in key. I got the chords and I got the melody from the same exact scale.
Now, all too often, terms in music are frequently said out of context or over-exaggerated. For instance, when we hear someone singing a little off the melody, we often hear that they were singing out of key, when in actuality, it has to do with the singer's intonation. This basically means that they were singing the right note, almost. They simply may be a little too high or a little too low in pitch, but the note is almost there. This is when we are saying that they are singing flat, which means a little too low, or sharp, meaning too high. For someone to be singing completely in another key usually means they don't just simply know the melody, because they are singing the wrong notes altogether. And this very well may be the case, but it is just more common that the singer is very close, just not close enough. And again, this has to do with the singer's intonation rather than the key that they are singing. As I mentioned earlier, we often hear or even say musical terms used out of context or over-exaggerated. Another one of these terms is singing flat. I've personally noticed that whenever a singer is singing pitchy, as it's sometimes called, the average critic will be quick to say, oh, they were singing flat, without really thinking, is this actually the case? To be honest, I hardly ever hear someone say, oh, they were singing sharp. In fact, the term singing flat in many people's minds simply means that they were singing dull, with no expression, like a flat performance. But to recognize these faults in ourselves, we must recognize the difference between singing with a boring style or whether or not we are singing flat or sharp. Now, if I had to guess which is more common between singing too low or too high, I would have to say it would be singing too low. Although some people lean more towards one than the other. But to not give enough, which is the basis for singing flat, is a very common human flaw. We often hold back from things, especially if we're unsure. And holding back power often makes the voice not quite hit the mark. To avoid singing flat, there are a couple of flash fixes that we can use. One of them is to be punchy. When notes start to go higher, we need to give them a little quick burst of power to hit the notes more accurately. If we ease into the notes, one of the downfalls is to sing flat. So try to hit higher notes with a burst, to quickly get to the note rather than ease into it. Now, it's not only high notes that is the thing that's susceptible to singing flat. Oftentimes, when notes drop down, we accidentally drop too far. This is extremely common. To avoid this from occurring, it is my recommendation to start thinking up. It's amazing how powerful the mind is. If we simply think of up, the voice seems to follow. It almost nudges it higher and therefore puts us on pitch. This is an attitude that you can carry all the way through the song, to think up. But please remember, I'm not recommending lifting your head up or turning your eyes up towards the ceiling. Tilting the head up causes strain on the larynx. And raising the eyes just looks kind of funny. So remember, it's more so the mental state of thinking up rather than physically moving a body part upward. Now, as far as singing sharp is concerned, what I have come to observe over the years is that sharpness stems from over-trying. When a high note approaches, we sometimes go for it to the point where it's simply too much. And the only way to avoid this is to be aware that too much is simply too much. To give just the right amount of power is something that improves through time, especially when we are striving to achieve it. I recommend using the pitch matching software available to you through this site and experiment a little with a song of your choice. If you hear a faulty note and don't have access to the note layout on sheet music, simply try and sing sharper or flatter using the software's waveform as a guide. Make mental observations of whether or not you lean towards singing too high or too low. Notice if it's because you don't go high enough on high notes or flat on low notes or whatever. Look for your pattern of difficulty. The more you understand your weaknesses, the better off you'll be able to correct them. But the bottom line is this. Whether you're a person who has been told that you sing out of key or maybe tone deaf, or you just have some minor difficulties with certain areas of pitch matching, don't guess your way through correcting the problem. Know your faults, know your melodies, and listen before you sing. Let your mind have a mental picture of the note or notes that you're trying to hit, even if it means using another instrument or sheet music to find it. Get it into your mind's ear so that the voice itself knows what to sing. I am Stephen Childs of virtualvoicelessons.net, and I would like to say thank you for listening, and God bless.